Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Leaders in Supply Chain podcast. I am your host, Radu Palamariu, Managing Director of Elcat Global.
It's my pleasure to have with us today another great guest, Tonya Jackson. She's the Senior Vice President and Chief Product Delivery Officer for Lexmark International. Lexmark is one of the leading companies providing printing and laser imaging solutions and products worldwide. Tonya has been with Lexmark for more than 36 years, long time, many different roles. And currently she's responsible for hardware and supplies development, supply chain manufacturing, as well as service delivery. And from 2016 to 2020, she served as Chief Supply Chain Officer responsible for worldwide supply chain operations, as well as the shared service centers for Lexmark. So Tonya, thanks for joining us. I know it's very early on your side of the planet in US. Welcome.
Thank you. Appreciate the opportunity. Thanks.
And maybe, we were joking before, but maybe tell us a little bit about, how you're putting headhunters out of job, like, people like myself, if everybody was like you, 36 years in the same company, then definitely we would be dinosaurs, right? Disappearing species. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah. Okay. I'll start with, you say 36 years somewhere because it's a good place. And I can't say enough good things about Lexmark and the people who work there. So I was explaining that I started at IBM in 1985, actually, up in New York out of college. And I moved down to IBM Lexington. And then IBM Lexington was spun off from IBM and became Lexmark in 1991. So when you add those 30 plus 6 years together, it comes up to 36. If you knock the 6 off, it's still 30, still a long time. So I'll give you kind of a quick overview of the jobs real at a real high level to see how it all, how the career kind of came together. But I started in a quality engineering role, supporting the manufacturing operations up in New York. And then moving to Lexington, moved into the R&D team. We had another. You mentioned the laser printers. We also made inkjet printers a while ago, and that was the division that I was in. And it was a bit of a startup within a large company. So you got to do a lot of different jobs there because it was just a small division. So that was where I stayed for 10, 11 years, and then made a decision. We spent a lot of time at Lexmark on career development, succession planning, all those kinds of things. And I chose a track for more general management, which means, you kind of want to be used in different parts of the business. So you start to rotate around a bit. So I moved to a corporate role. It was the sustainability team. The reason was there was a lot of focus on sustainable product design at the time. And so rather than have purely compliance-minded people there, they wanted someone who had been in R&D that could, again, learn a new language on the compliance side, but be able to speak that, go back to the R&D team and understand what was needed from a sustainable design perspective. You also got the external. I got to meet more customers than I would have in the R&D role. And internal, I got to present to the board of directors because it was a kind of a governance role and from a compliance perspective. Then moved back to R&D for a while, and then moved over to our manufacturing team. Supplies manufacturing, in fact, which was under we have an end-to-end supply chain, which we'll probably get into a little bit. And that role was under the supply chain organization, and then eventually became, was able to lead the whole supply chain organization. So it's been a journey, been a lot of fun, met some really interesting people. I highly recommend rotating as you can throughout your career.
Absolutely. Here you go. Wow, 36 years. That is completely unheard of nowadays. I think maybe a younger viewer. And then David is saying, you can safely say you're part of the furniture in the office too. Kudos to you.
Wow.
That's a way to say it. I don't know if globally, but here in Asia, I've heard it a few times. I guess a question prompts into my mind, Tonya. It might not necessarily be easy, but you did mention the part with the sustainability and client facing as more as board facing. We've recently written an article on why chief supply chain officers are great to be CEOs. And one of the missing pieces on that article that somebody pointed out is that we should be even more focused on customer facing. So my question to you, if you look back into your career, right, how important was that and how did that play out, right, in terms of having that customer first mentality, I guess, and maybe talk a little bit to that.
No, it's a good, very good question, because I think, it definitely was a part of the company that I wasn't, well, a part of the whole overall business that I wasn't as exposed to. And so you really start to, a big part of everybody, I think you have to have empathy for to understand where somebody's coming from, right? And that's a lot easier when you actually experience when you actually experience that opportunity in another area. So I think going on presenting with sales with my colleagues that were in sales and watching them and understanding their challenges, right? Because when you're in supply chain, you have a view of your challenges, and you have a view of, well, if they only did this or if they only did that, then your job might be easier. And while that could be true, everybody's out there, all of us in every company, we are supporting the customer. I mean, that's why we exist, right? So I think it gives you a good feeling of that balance between trying to stay true to your operation, stay true to what you're trying to do, but also be flexible and understand that wherever possible, you're going to, you have your processes, but you're also going to try to stretch and try to be as flexible as you can to meet the customer's requirements. So I think that was a good opportunity for me. And I think, it's one of the things, and the other part of that is that you develop a network within the sales organization or within the sustainability group or within R&D. So when things go wrong or when you need something quickly, you have people you can immediately reach out to. And then the same way with me, they can, quickly call and say, this happened. I know it wasn't planned, but what can you do? Those kinds of things.
And talking a little bit about the structure of the organization, and you mentioned end-to-end, and your scope is quite large. I mean, you have product design, you have engineering. It's interesting how it seems like you connected the dots, right? So you're, from where you started to what you are now, it's all kind of coming together, right? Like Steve Jobs said, connecting the dots backwards. And I want to link it because we did discuss offline, right? So let's bring that into the discussion in terms of the chip shortages that is affecting most industries now. And how is that impacting you at Lexmark? And then we'll get into also the engineering working supply chain.
Yeah, I'll give you a little bit of background. So in September of this year, we had a reorganization in the company. We said we're going to have like 3 strategic focus areas, and one is the core imaging, which you talked about. It's what we do. We're largely a printer manufacturer, printer solutions provider, and then there's a second group that's kind of growing adjacencies related to how we serve it to our main offering of managed print services, and how we can provide services for other aspects of our customers' businesses. And then we have a third group called Lexmark Ventures. And so they're out there taking some of the technology that we have and using it in other applications. So for the core imaging, we put together the R&D team, the R&D team, the supply chain team, and the service delivery team. And so that group is all things related to providing the best customer experience on the imaging side. So going from, we have a portfolio enablement team, which means what products are we going to design, build, how many SKUs, those kinds of things. I mean, we don't decide the SKUs on our own. You work in marketing for that. But really, how can we service that? How can we best manufacture that? How can we keep it out in the field? How do we service it? How do we refurb it? How do we return it? All of those types of things. So it was kind of cultures coming together, because you can imagine every group has a bit of a different culture. I can tell you the crisis in supply chain has been ongoing now, but the semiconductor crisis in particular has really brought the team together, because you have what I talked to you about. We have this shortage right now that's going on. And so you have the sourcing team out doing all kinds of spot buys and trying to find, alternative parts. And then the nice thing about this organization, first of all, it starts with fantastic people. But what they're looking at is real time. The engineers are helping the sourcing team make decisions on parts. You should buy this part, not that part. If we buy this, what can we do? Lots of work looking at the printed circuit board layouts and those types of things. So we're able to be much more flexible, much more agile as a joint organization. It could have worked without, it would have worked either way. I'll be honest. But I think we can make those trade-offs much quicker since we're all together and deciding workload and splitting out, assignments and those types of things.
And I recently saw, back to the SNOP, right? I guess the forever fight, war, rivalry, whatever you want to call it, right? It tends to be fairly negatively perceived, right, between sales and operations, supply chain, right? And there was somebody that they were wrestling. I think there was a picture that I saw recently. So you talked about engineering and supply chain working closely, right? Which sometimes that's a fight in itself.
Yep.
How do you deal with the sales, right? So you spoke about the past, right? Going to meetings with sales. How do you kind of continue with your team, right? How do you make sure that they kind of understand and speak the same language as the sales teams?
Absolutely. So again, this crisis has brought us all together a lot closer. We have weekly, like S&OP is a process, right? And what we are doing right now is, I'd say we're meeting much more frequently between actually it's finance, sales, and then the product delivery team, my team, to understand product allocation, because we're in the electronic space and there's thousands of components that are unavailable right now, right? And varying degrees of availability, thousands of components that go across the product line. And so we are deciding which products we build with the components that we have based on customers, based on profitability, based on, a host of things. So it's a matter of, meeting weekly and saying, this is what, how to set production. What are we going to build? What do you need? Which customers are first? Those kinds of things. So the alignment has gotten better. Again, it's very tough operating environment right now. So everybody is trying their very best to make things work for the customer. So there's a lot going on, but I can tell you the alignment is very good. I also, spend some time. Another thing that we do with my leadership team, we take the sales leadership team that we work to lunch every now and again, right? So it's, we like to keep them happy and let them know we're working as hard as we can. It's tough, right? If you're in sales, you want product, right? You've made the sale, you want product, and it's difficult for us too, because we want to be able to execute and provide. It's just very difficult operating environment right now.
And I'll pick a question from Srini. I guess it's something that is pretty much on everybody's strategy or change of strategy, right? How have sourcing patterns, I guess, if any, changed for the long term due to the chip crisis?
Yeah, so I think what you will, you'll see from a sourcing perspective, you'll see some of the major suppliers starting to add capacity. That's not a short-term solution, but that will help over time. You will probably see people change their inventory policies and those types of things. The challenge is that there's so many different electronic components. You can't buffer your way out of this, right? You can't do that. So one of the things that what everybody typically does is try to, dual source or have multiples or have at least, 2 or 3 sources. We're finding that's not enough on some of these, what we call components that are deep in the supply chain. You're really critical technology components. Yeah, you can probably live with a dual source and get through it. But honestly, and what's happening right now, some of the commodity level electronics is what's tougher to find for some of our boards. So what we're doing, again, going back to the engineering team, is working with the engineering team and trying to design, look at designs. It won't help us today, but going forward, how can we really be as, the word may be vanilla or off the shelf as possible from a packaging perspective? Sometimes you have the electronic component, but then the packaging around it, is unique or special. So how can we lay out the boards so that we are much more flexible? Two is not enough. You need something that, maybe you've got 5 or 6 suppliers that can provide this device. And maybe that means your board layout is maybe not as, cost effective as you would like. And that's some of the reasons. I mean, the engineers are wonderful and they're doing things for function, for cost and all those kinds of things. But we've got to figure out how to balance that trade-off a bit more in order to get through these kind of crises. So it's not, you can't just source your way out of it. There's got to be some engineering help as well.
And to this point with the sourcing, dual sourcing, I had a recent conversation with I can't remember now the company, but anyways, the point was they had dual sourcing, right?
Yep.
In theory, seems like they're protected somewhat. And then when they look deeper, I think this was tier 2, 3, I don't know. Anyways, and once they look at tier 4, they figured that both the sources had the same, for certain components, had the same provider. So yeah, you're dual sourcing,
Yes.
but in actual fact, you're not. Because if that tier 4 falls, then basically both your sources fall, right? So,
right.
And you told me offline, right, about how you build your own. So let's talk maybe now live, right, about
You're exactly right. I think one of the things that I'll go back to the original that other question. I think you can fool yourself with dual sourcing, or you can because supply chains, nearly all supply chains are built with these tiers, right? So you send the signal to the tier one, they send the signal to tier two, and then they send it. There's a time lapse where they send it back, and then it goes to tier three, and it goes and so forth. And to your point, some of these tier twos are getting the next level. They're sharing suppliers, right? So you're a tier one, you have no idea what's going on, behind that. And so what we have had, and it's very slow. And when you have products that share some of these deep level, these components down in the tiers, and then you got even bigger problem, because there's some products that you think you can build, but they share those components. And if you're short, then you've got a bigger problem. So what we quickly discovered that we needed to get better visibility down the tiers, right? Because right now lead times are moving. I'm not saying anything that people don't know, but when lead times move as fast as they've moved from 8 weeks to 17 to 24 to 52 weeks, the suppliers' systems can't respond fast enough to those changes, and the signals are all jumbled. So what we did was we developed a tool to connect our bill of materials across all of the product lines, and to maximize to understand where all these components are used. So we can see all the way down the supply chain, and it's regardless of where these components are actually going. So the supplier that I'm dealing with, supplier X, doesn't have the visibility. We have visibility to all of the components. That supplier X only has visibility to their components. And they may be short, or they may be slow, or the lead times may be moving, but we can see those components now at another supplier. And this is not easy, but then we can move them. We can say, okay, you're short, but they're sitting over here. This supplier is very vertical. They can only see what's in their lane. We're able to see everything because, a supply base is a network, right? So we see that there's components over here, this supplier, and then you do your negotiations. I need you to move this over here. Without that tool that we have, we would be basically blind right now. Now, I'd say this is unprecedented times. In general, it works, right? Because there's a very standard lead times, and things are I wouldn't say ever normal in operations, but they're workable. But right now, with everything being so chaotic and unpredictable, we just can't rely on the visibility that our tier one supplier has. And that doesn't mean they're not good suppliers. It's just very difficult times right now. So
I want to, yeah.
I was going to say, we talk about big data a lot. When you talk about the data in supply chain with all the components, is big data. And we talk about doing things with big data. The team, very talented team that I'm working with, they've taken big data and just made it something manageable so that we can see where all these components are, what can we build with the stack of components that we have.
But where I want to double click a little bit, there's of course a lot of software companies, right? That
Yep.
Depends who you ask, they say they're the best in the world. Depending,
Yep.
visibility and IBP and big data and
Yep.
AI and machine learning. They throw all these terms around, and some are very good. It's interesting that you went down the path of creating your own, right? So I guess maybe tell us a little bit what's the advantages in this. I mean, there's always two sides to the coin, right?
Yep.
So maybe tell us more.
Yeah, so I'm going to start out by saying, first of all, we didn't have time to go out and, partner with someone and provide them all our data. And we didn't have time because we needed to continue to provide for our customers, right? So part of it was out of necessity. I'd say the other thing is we've looked at some tools in the past, and there's a lot of to us and happy to talk to people who have a different experience. A lot of it is visibility through distribution. So, where's your product on the way to, right? You've assembled it, and where is it on the water? Where is it on the, on the road? All those kinds of things. Deep into the supply chain, meaning, down to tier 10, we haven't seen as much intelligence there. It's hard. I mean, it's pretty difficult. And maybe we need to do a better job of when this is over with, of comparing, what's out there available. But for us, we had to have something now. And we're not, the other piece of it is we weren't, let's say, designed to go off and, have people's eyes on every single component that we needed. And this is largely in the electronic space. I mean, some of the other components obviously are much more normal right now. So for us, to answer your question, it was out of necessity that we had to get better at this. To go back to your question about the sales team, we needed to be able to tell them with more certainty when they were going to have products. And without any visibility, we just were too far off. And, if we had installations or rollouts and those kinds of things, we had to get better at communicating with the customer. So mainly it was out of necessity. And the second thing is we haven't seen any tools that can give us our total lay of the land down to those suppliers that we would normally not have eyes on.
No, but Tonya, you talked about Lexmark Ventures, right? So now, free of charge for you, because you came to the podcast, you should now take that tool, give it to the guys that do the ventures, and start selling it.
Funny you say that. I've actually talked to the head of ventures, and I've kind of kidded with our system, the fantastic engineers and the data analysts and the supply chain. It's been, the other thing, the people that developed it, you've got an engineer that's looking at all the components. You've got a supply chain expert who's set up suppliers in the past, and they did all of the data analytics and building this tool. And then we had a planner, right, who has to plan parts to say, this is all cool, I can't use this. So to sit down with them and say, this is how I plan. So they were iterating on the tool the entire time, because you can develop something that's unusable, that's really cool, but nobody can use it, right? So we had the planner come in and work with them, and they did some redesigning and all those kinds of things, so that it's not now all planners can actually use it. So what I said we need on top of this is somebody in UX to come in, to your point, and then let's put a face on this, and so that we can share it.
But that sometimes, or a lot of times, so what I've seen in terms of a lot of startups where they failed, right? And there's a lot of very young, dynamic, not so young as well, but very tech-focused talent out there. To your point, they come and design the best technology, throw all these buzzwords again, AI, ML, whatever, machine learning, whatever, right? But they fail to, I don't know. I mean, when you have a box and it's stuck in the port and there's a guy that has to sign the paper, they don't understand that, right? And then the system does not account for that. And then it breaks down because they didn't actually, they don't understand how it works in practicality, right? In theory, a lot of things work. In practice, no, they don't.
It's funny because when the team was developing it, we were, they were held up in a room, socially distanced, of course. And when I saw the tool, everybody was so excited about it. It was like, wow, we can finally see what's down there. And our planner, the lead planner, I won't mention her name on this podcast, but I love her. She said, I can't use this. So she said, you have to be sitting right beside me to tell me what to click, and so she said, this is not helpful. So then it was like, well, what do you need? And so they spent another few days and it came out in a very different place. But that was important because we have been operating, and we continue to operate with, I say, open communication, full transparency. If it's, let's not, mince words. If something isn't working, let's say it's not working, right? So I think there's a good culture that we have where people were really digging in and trying to develop this as fast as possible, but also to say, this is nice, but I need something else, right? And so the three that group between the planners, the engineers, and the supply chain people just put out they did a couple of iterations, and they've got a really good tool now. Now, the issue is, I like to say, before we were blind and didn't know what was behind tier one. Now we can see. It's not good, right? We can see the problems now, right? It's very visible where you can see what you're missing. And so what we built into the tool is, okay, we got gaps of supply here, but then you go in and say, well, I got spot buys to cover this. Or is a spot buy enough? Because you don't want to buy something and you still got a hole at another component. So you're able to say, should I make this spot buy versus this? And will this keep me whole from a product perspective? Can I find an alternate part? When am I going to make up lead time? So you can lay that into the tool to make, financial decisions on what should you go off and chase, because everybody's, spending more money than we should right now, because we have to in order, it's just that kind of a market.
Yeah. Now, look, some great comments. Wei Chuan is a dear contact of ours. He's the leader on the supply chain side of the Economic Development Board of Singapore. So some good feedback. We might take this as a case study
Nice.
For some of the
I'd
practitioners
love
here.
for you to do it. It's, I mean, it was, I think what we had, quite honestly, was a false sense of security because our tier ones, when all of this, kind of chaos happened, is that they were getting signals that everything's good because they thought they were. But then the lead times moved, and then it was like a couple of weeks.
And then something's.
So I was, we were blind, like we were just blind to what was going on. And now we could see. It's not, I'm not going to say we're seeing a pretty picture, seeing things that can be solved now or not, right? Okay, well, I've got this problem. Before you had a sense of security.
You're like the ostrich, head in the sand and hope for the best. But
everybody was working as hard as they could, but you were getting surprised constantly, right? And so now, eyes wide open, where's my hole and how can I go solve it?
And I'll pull a question from Mike. You spoke a little bit of the stocking, so I'll focus on the transportation side of things, specifically also because it's a mess. It's a major mess at the moment. We talked also, there's a new port that goes offline. There's a new thing. There's a new strike. There's a God knows, right? Container prices are higher than Bitcoin is, right? So talk a little bit to the transportation side, Tonya.
Yeah. So I would say we are like everyone else here and looking at increasing rates and those types, trying to decide, do you lock into a contract for some period of time or do you continue to play the spot market, those kinds of things. I have no tool or no magic developed there. We're just trying to stay with our strategy is to continue with the port strategy that we have because we've looked at moving, trying to come in with different ports and the rates aren't. The lead time increases a bit for us and the rates aren't that much more. So we've been working with our logistics providers to secure containers and to secure lanes and those types of things. And we are doing, everything we can to optimize for the containers, but we're just waiting like everyone else for this to settle out. If the question is about lead times and predictability, we are not as predictable as we would like to be. It seems to be getting better on the West Coast a bit in terms of the standard deviation, the deviation from normal, but it's still longer than what we've seen. Containers are not where they're supposed to be. We're kind of in the same boat. So basically, I would say we're competing like everybody else, paying more than certainly we want to, but trying to really optimize the packaging so that we can, when we find a container, we can, we make sure we get the most.
Squeeze
them in as best we can.
Question, moving a little bit on the people side, right? And you spoke to team being key. Tell us a little bit, what else do you see in terms of building great teams? Maybe is there a secret sauce? Is there a combination of hard skills and soft skills? Talk a little bit to that.
Yeah, I think the great team starts with, really good people. And there's a combination certainly of technical skills that people, have and that people can learn. For the folks in supply chain, well, I think it's really true of everybody, especially in this era. You got to be. I like to focus on a learning organization. We talk about risk taking and those kinds of things. It's similar to me, but I'll twist it a little bit. I want to always make sure that we are as leaders, or if we get ideas and those kinds of things, instead of asking why, we're saying why not. That sounds reasonable. Let's go try it. And the more you try things and you learn from them, surely you're going to fail with something, but you really don't learn. You don't learn new things unless you go off and pilot things and experiment. Because I think in operations, you can get really good at turning the crank and you can you figure it out, right? But you do it the hard way. So I think for me, it's important to make sure that we allow good ideas to be heard. Especially in times like this, there's nobody out there that has been through anything like this before. So we should all be willing to listen to new ideas. And they're not all going to work, but the more we listen, then that learning, that becomes part of the culture where people can go back and say, hey, I was empowered to try this. I tried this and hey, it didn't work. Or I tried this and it did work. And people, you build optimism and people feel like they're really a part of the team because everybody in any kind of operation is working for the customer, right? And so everybody wants to be successful. So for me, it's about giving people, the ability to try new things. And again, it doesn't mean everything's going to work, but we learn something in the process.
Mm. And how do you keep yourself? This also popped into my mind as we were speaking. How do you keep yourself on top, if there's such a thing? I don't know if any of us is on top, but current, right? With so many changes, new technologies, new software, new solutions, is there a preferred way in which you extract gist of information, or is there some subscription? Is there books that you read? I'm just curious. How do you kind of keep learning yourself?
There's a lot out there right now. I do, because Google is Google. Once you start clicking on things, they tend to send you more, right? So I do try to follow trends in supply chain and in R&D and all, and in just kind of customer delivery overall. We have things that I don't understand. I really try to find people who do, or people who are kind of on that leading edge. A lot of the things that you mentioned, AI and machine learning and all those kinds of things, we have people in our company that are very good at it. And so we try to, we have what's called the lunch and learn. I'm sure it can be called different things at different companies, but we try to have sessions with experts in other parts of the business to talk to the product delivery team on just, what they're doing in their business and how we can maybe perhaps use some of that technology. Because right now there's so much, people are getting slammed right and left. And so they need that. They don't have time on their own sometimes. So we try to create, and I try to create these lunch and learn so that you can just kind of sit back for, an hour, take something else in and perhaps, noodle on it and say, this is how I might apply it, to my problem, or have these experts maybe come back and say, and present them with the problem now that you kind of understand a little bit about what they do. So for me, it's about, kind of keeping up on the internet, but also using either people in my external network to understand what they're doing. But certainly we have just a lot of different people within Lexmark that are on this emerging technology, and they understand and they learn it. And there's no reason for me to try to learn it, right? I bring them in and we talk it through.
Heck, if you were able to develop your own tool for visibility, I tell you,
I'm telling you, that was out of desperation.
I will come as an intern, right? We're supposed to be headhunters. I'm going to come as an intern, though it might not be safe. I don't promise it's safe for your people.
You would be amazed. You would be amazed what you do out of, desperation. You want to serve the customer, so it's like I got to figure something else out. I can't sit here. I got to figure this out.
And another, right, technology, right? What is, in your view, within the realm of supply chain, end-to-end supply chain, right, R&D, what is one that is underrated and one that is overrated? Putting you on, maybe it's a hard question, but what's underrated in your mind, but also what's overrated?
In what is this, in technology or in what?
In technology in general, right? So you can talk, I throw you just random blockchain or whatever. I don't want to put words into your mouth, right? But yeah.
Yeah, I think we talked about this one. It's hard for me to say overrated. I just haven't quite figured it out in terms of how we should leverage it. And that's blockchain and those types of technologies. I study it. I haven't quite figured it out yet. It's hard for me to say it's underrated. Overrated. Let's say I don't understand it. I'd say the underrated this is not so much a technology, and I'm going to change your question a little bit. I'm going to say what's underrated is communication to get to the technology, meaning communication coming where we started between the groups, like the sales team, they have a technology to get the demand planning. The supply chain is looking at the supply side, and all of these tools are coming together. But I think the communication between the teams, there's a way to link those two, all of that data, all of that technology. So I think that's kind of an opportunity if we can figure out, because we do speak different languages but we've got data. The data's fine, but if we can figure out the communication to connect those two technologies together, I think you got something there.
Great point, Tonya. Final question from me. One piece of advice for the younger listeners, maybe from your career, right? If you were to look back, something that helped you the most, what is it? What would you say?
My long career. Yeah, for me, it's if you're offered a leadership opportunity, especially, outside of your course. So I'm going, no matter what area you're in, and you are offered something outside of your core skill set, you've been successful in a core skill set, and somebody says, hey, I want you to go try this. You should not blink. You should go for it if you're interested. Don't just say, yeah, I'll do anything. But if you're interested, don't hesitate. I would say it allows you a couple of things. You get outside of your comfort zone, and you have that balance of excitement and fear, which is I'm saying that for myself. I have a balance of excitement and fear, and that's just about right. But what it does when you make that first move outside of your core skill set, you start to ride a change wave, right? And that's like maybe for the first time. And you go through all of those emotions of, you feel inadequate. You used to be good at this, but now you don't know how to do this and all those types of things. But you develop a muscle for that. And so the next time that you're doing something, you're still as uncomfortable, but you can get through it and you know what that looks like. And you give yourself a lot more grace. You're not as hard on yourself, right? Because it's like, oh, I've seen this. I know what this feels like. So I think people fear what they don't know, or they, change is just good, and being uncomfortable is good. So don't back down from an opportunity because you don't know much about it. That's an opportunity to learn, and an opportunity to learn how to learn.
Lovely. I love the message, Tonya. Well, on that note, very grateful for your sharing, and very practical, down to earth, easy to take home. I think the audience, we've had a lot of comments. I'll take you separately as well. It took a lot. We'll definitely do something here in Singapore and share your case study with the Economic
Would love
Development
to do
Board.
that. I would love to do that. I think we've got something. Again, it might be it's homegrown.
And maybe the two of us go and set up a startup, and we do it as part of Lexmark and market the software. But I definitely think that you've got something. Usually the UX is sometimes easier to do because it's
you should really do UX from the beginning. So right.
In an ideal world, but sometimes you have very fancy dashboards, but actually you lack the back end, right? So it's a funny how these things work. So, but yeah. Anyways, thanks a lot. Stay healthy, Tonya. And
thank you for the opportunity.
See you soon.
All right, thanks.
Thank you for listening to our podcast. If you liked what you heard, be sure to go to www.elcotglobal.com and click the podcast button for all the show notes of the interview. Also, subscribe to our mailing list to get our latest updates first. If you're listening through a streaming platform like iTunes, Spotify, or Stitcher, we would appreciate a kind review. 5-star works best to keep us going and our production team happy. And of course, share it with your friends. I'm most active on LinkedIn, so do feel free to follow me. And if you have any suggestions on what to do and who to invite next, don't hesitate to drop me a note. And if you're looking to hire top executives in supply chain or transform your business, of course, contact us as well to find out how we can help.